She invited a wheelchair-bound billionaire to be her wedding date, but his unexpected reveal stunned the entire crowd. The sun was slipping low over the south side of Atlanta, brushing Brenda's apartment complex with a soft, late-evening glow that made everything feel warmer than it really was. She stood outside her door, dress draped over her arm, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. It wasn't the wedding that made her pause. She'd been to 100 family events like this. Loud aunties, warm laughter, too much food, questions she wasn't ready to answer. But tonight, something inside her felt different. Her hand tightened around the fabric, and a faint tremor ran through her fingers, the kind that betrays what the mouth refuses to confess. She was going to her cousin's wedding with Jeremy, a man she barely knew. A man whose presence had been gentle, steady, unexpected. A man who moved through the world in a wheelchair, or at least, that's what she believed. Why did her heart feel like it was trying to tell her something she couldn't quite understand? A buzz broke through the quiet. She looked down at her phone. Jeremy, I'm outside. It should have made her smile. Instead, a pulse of doubt pressed against her ribs. Not because she worried about what people might whisper about his chair. No, Brenda wasn't afraid of judgment. She was afraid of truly being seen. Just as that thought settled in her chest, a car horn pierced the air, sharp enough to make her flinch. She moved to the balcony rail and looked down toward the curb. Jeremy was trying to ease himself out of the Uber, one wheel catching against the concrete lip. For a moment, he looked stuck, not helpless, but caught between intention and movement. Something shifted inside her then, quietly, firmly, like life nudging her forward and whispering, "Tonight isn't just another wedding. This is the one that changes something." And the question she couldn't shake, the one sitting right beneath her heartbeat, rose to the surface. Why does something about him, something she can't name, feel both safe and dangerous at the same time? Family, if you've ever stepped into a moment that scared you and excited you at the same time, tap that like button. It lets me know you understand Brenda's heart already. Welcome to Mr. Graham Family, where real stories teach real lessons. Every video carries a message, a moment of truth, or a reminder of what matters most. If you're new here, subscribe and stay close. Before you watch, like the video and drop a comment with the time and where you're tuning in from. This family reaches far. Brenda stepped back into her apartment for a moment, closing the door with her shoulder as if the quiet inside could steady her heartbeat. The dress in her hand swayed gently, brushing against her thigh, reminding her this night wasn't negotiable. Her cousin had been calling all week asking, "Brenda, don't you dare show up late." She laid the dress across her bed, smoothing the fabric the way her mother used to smooth her curls as a little girl before church. The action grounded her, even if only for a breath. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eye. She leaned closer, studying herself, not with vanity, but with uncertainty. "Why are you nervous?" She whispered to the empty room. It wasn't a question she wanted to explore too deeply. Nerves weren't new to her, but this kind felt strange, not fragile, but meaningful, like her spirit sensed an unexpected turn ahead. She slipped into the dress, the fabric hugging her just right, the gold tones catching the warm light. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, the same style her aunties always said made her look sweet enough to break someone's heart without trying. She laughed under her breath at the memory, even as the nerves tightened again. Another buzz from her phone, another message from Jeremy. "Jeremy, take your time. No rush." She stared at the screen, longer than necessary. His patience stood out. Not forced, not overdone, just simple, kind, the sort of kindness that doesn't ask for attention. She picked up her earrings and let her mind drift to the few conversations they'd shared. His humor, his calm, his quiet way of observing the world. He moved differently, not just physically, but emotionally, almost as if he carried a secret burden he never named. Her thumb hovered over the reply box, but she didn't type anything. Instead, she exhaled slowly and whispered, "Why does this feel like more than a wedding date?" She grabbed her small clutch and headed for the door again. As she stepped back onto the balcony, the evening breeze touched her skin, cool and steady. Jeremy was still down there near the Uber, adjusting his chair, unaware she was watching. And for a second she caught something in his posture, a hint of frustration he quickly masked with a practiced smile. Something about that moment pressed harder on her chest. Not pity, not discomfort, just a strange sense that he carried more within him than he ever let show. She locked her apartment door behind her, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and whispered to herself as she descended, "Please don't let tonight be another story I regret." She didn't know it yet, but tonight wasn't the start of regret. It was the beginning of truth. Brenda reached the bottom step just as the streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting soft halos along the sidewalk. Atlanta evenings had a way of feeling both familiar and unpredictable. Cars humming by, neighbors greeting each other from porches, the distant bass from someone's weekend playlist pulsing through the warm air. But everything around her seemed to fade the moment her eyes landed on Jeremy. He was still adjusting his position beside the Uber, fingers working carefully along the wheel to straighten it. The driver stood off to the side, unsure whether to help or give him space. Jeremy gave the man a polite nod, managing the moment with the kind of quiet dignity Brenda rarely saw in people who were used to being catered to. She paused before stepping off the curb, letting herself really look at him, not with judgment or pity, but with a curiosity she couldn't quite explain. His face carried that same gentle composure she'd noticed at the cafe, but tonight there was something else layered beneath it. Something like effort. Not physical effort, but emotional. As if he was preparing himself for more than just a wedding. Their eyes met for a brief second, and he smiled, small, almost shy. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She approached him, and for a moment the energy between them shifted. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. The kind of shift that makes the world feel a little too still, a little too intentional. "You look incredible," Jeremy said, his tone genuine, not embellished. Brenda felt warmth rise to her cheeks, though she tried to play it cool. "Thank you. You clean up pretty nice yourself." He laughed, and the sound eased something tight inside her chest. But as she stepped closer to help him adjust the wheel, she noticed again how the chair rocked slightly out of place, the same catch she'd seen from the balcony. "Let me help," she said. He hesitated before nodding, something flickering in his eyes, gratitude mixed with something quieter, almost guarded. When she steadied the wheel, their hands brushed for just a second. The contact was brief, but it carried an unexpected spark, a warning almost, telling her this night would not stay simple. Once he was properly positioned, Jeremy exhaled, relief slipping through his smile. "Thank you, Brenda. I swear I'm usually better at this." She gave a light shrug. "We all have moments, no big deal." But as they started moving toward the car waiting to take them to the venue, Brenda felt a tug in her gut. Not fear, not uncertainty, but something right in between. That strange mix of safe and dangerous. Like standing at the edge of a decision she didn't fully understand yet. She looked at him once more, really looked, and the question whispered through her mind again. Why does something about this man make her feel like she's stepping into something real, and possibly life-changing? The night air carried the question with them as they reached the car. A quiet beginning to a truth neither of them could avoid. Even before Brenda ever crossed paths with Jeremy, her life had a rhythm shaped by the south side of Atlanta, a rhythm loud enough to be felt through the walls but soft enough to leave room for her own thoughts. She grew up in a neighborhood where kids learned early how to find joy in small moments and where aunties believed every conversation needed at least one lesson, one warning, and one joke. Their voices were the soundtrack of her childhood. "Brenda, you can't choose a man by his smile. You better choose him by how he treats your spirit. Love don't pay the bills, baby. But the right partner will help you figure out how to keep them paid. Beauty is nice, but peace is priceless." Those lines followed her into adulthood like familiar shadows. Whenever she sat at her auntie's kitchen tables, there were pots simmering, laughter bouncing off the walls, and occasional eyes turned toward her with that unspoken question. "So, who you talking to these days?" She always laughed it off, brushing her hand through her curls as if the gesture could sweep the conversation away. "I'm good, Auntie. Work been keeping me busy." But that wasn't the real reason. The truth was that dating, for her, felt like walking through a hallway full of doors that led nowhere. Each experience left her with a mix of amusement and exhaustion. There was the guy who insisted she didn't need to work so hard, as if independence was a character flaw. The one who constantly claimed he was too busy, yet always found time for everyone except her. The one who thought being interested in her meant she should automatically carry the emotional weight of his life. And the one who told her she was too outspoken, right before trying to decide what she should wear to dinner. Every time, she walked away with her dignity intact and her patience a little thinner. Her cousins told her she should try dating apps. Her aunties told her she was letting good men pass by. Her coworkers suggested blind dates. But Brenda wasn't looking for someone to fill an empty space. She wasn't lonely. She wasn't desperate. She wanted something that felt real, something that didn't require her to shrink, compromise her voice, or carry someone's insecurities like an unpaid debt. She wanted a love she didn't have to force. Most nights after logging out from her remote tech support job, she curled up on her balcony with a cup of ginger tea, watching the city lights pulse through the horizon. From up there, she felt suspended between the world she came from and the life she was building, steady, independent, meaningful. But even in that comfort, she occasionally wondered if her heart had grown too protective of itself. It wasn't that she didn't believe in love. She did, deeply. She had seen love in her auntie's stubborn devotion to family. She had felt it in the way her cousins hyped her up before nights out. She had tasted it in every home-cooked meal passed across a crowded table. But romantic love, that remained uncertain. Some nights she felt the absence of it like a soft ache, not painful, just present. Other nights, she didn't think about it at all. Still, every time someone asked, "So, Brenda, when you bringing somebody home?" she felt the question sit heavier than she wanted to admit. Because somewhere inside her was a quiet hope, a fragile one, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right connection. Not perfect, not dramatic, just true. Her life moved forward as normal until the day she stepped into that small coffee shop on Auburn Avenue. The same place where Jeremy struggled with the doorway weeks later. The same place where an unexpected shift in her life would soon begin. But on this particular day in her past, she didn't know anything about fate or timing. She simply walked inside for her usual drink, laptop bag over her shoulder, mind focused on support tickets and weekend plans with her cousins. Looking back, she would realize that everything in her life, every auntie lesson, every failed date, every quiet night on her balcony, had prepared her to recognize something real when it finally showed up. She just didn't know it yet. For most people in Atlanta, Jeremy was just another face they didn't recognize. A quiet man who rolled through streets in a chair that seemed to belong to someone with a difficult story. But behind closed doors, beyond the tinted windows of a penthouse perched high above the city, his life looked nothing like the one he presented to the world. The place was immaculate, not in a cold way, but in a way that hinted at quiet routines, calculated habits, and a man who tried to keep his world predictable. Glass windows stretched from floor to ceiling, giving him a view of Atlanta's glow, a view he rarely enjoyed because he spent most evenings thinking instead of living. He came from a very different world, one shaped by an upbringing in Connecticut where wealth wasn't something people earned, it was something they inherited. He grew up in communities where families visited coastal retreats every summer, where appearances carried more weight than actual connection, and where people learned early how to smile politely while keeping a safe emotional distance. Money didn't impress him anymore, not after seeing how easily it shifted people's behavior. He remembered the moment his perspective shifted, the day he realized the people closest to him were there for what he provided, not who he was. Meetings, deals, celebrations, outings. They all carried the same undercurrent. Jeremy was useful. Jeremy was generous. Jeremy made things easier for everyone. But if he stopped, if he slipped, if he showed weakness, he suspected most of them would disappear. That suspicion turned into truth the moment he crafted his test. It began with the thought he couldn't shake. Would anyone stay if I had nothing to offer? So he staged the entire thing, the story that his finances collapsed, the announcement that he was stepping back from public life, and finally the decision to present himself as a man bound to a wheelchair. He told no one. The performance was perfect. He made sure of it. He wanted to believe at least a few people would choose him anyway. He was wrong. His fiancée at the time, someone he thought knew him beyond the surface, lasted only 3 weeks before quietly packing her belongings and leaving. No fight, no tears, no attempt to understand, just absence. Friends he traveled with stopped calling. Business partners found reasons to distance themselves. Family members whispered behind closed doors, wondering if his downfall meant they had to prepare for the embarrassment of being associated with him. Watching people slip away wasn't the painful part. It was realizing how quickly they did it. Yet Jeremy didn't break under the weight of it. He wasn't even surprised. What hurt him was something deeper, the confirmation that he had been lonely long before the test ever began. He spent evenings rolling through his penthouse, the wheels gliding smoothly across polished floors as he replayed scenes from his life. It felt strange to perform weakness while actually feeling hollow in places he never named. When he pretended to struggle, people looked away. When he appeared vulnerable, people became uncomfortable. When he needed something, people avoided eye contact. Each moment carved a quiet ache into his chest. But even in that ache, there was a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He told himself he needed to see it through, needed to know once and for all whether genuine kindness still existed in the world. The test changed his habits. He began visiting quieter areas of the city, places where people didn't know his last name or his history. Auburn Avenue became one of those refuges, not because of the buildings or the food, but because nobody there tried to treat him like a fallen star. They simply let him exist. The coffee shop became a silent part of his routine. He liked the hum of conversation, the warmth of the barista's greetings, the way people moved around each other without pretense. But the first day he tried to wheel himself through the narrow doorway, performing the difficulty he said he lived with, he felt something shift inside him when someone stepped forward without hesitation. Brenda. She didn't gasp. She didn't stare. She didn't hover as if helping him was a spectacle. She just held the door and smiled. A simple gesture, but to Jeremy, it cut deeper than any abandonment. She didn't know him. She didn't need anything from him. She didn't ask invasive questions. She didn't treat him like an object of pity or a burden. She treated him like a person. He carried that moment home with him, letting it replay in his mind while he sat by the massive window overlooking the city. For the first time in months, his loneliness felt slightly interrupted, not erased, but touched by something real. He knew he couldn't reveal anything. Not then. Not yet. The test had to continue, and he told himself he was strong enough to keep playing the part. But as the days passed, and Brenda appeared at the cafe again, laptop open, smile warm, presence steady, the chair he sat in began to feel heavier. The lie began to feel heavier, because he wasn't just testing the world anymore. He was meeting someone who might actually matter, and that terrified him in ways he didn't have the words for. Jeremy reached the cafe earlier than usual that morning. Auburn Avenue had just begun to wake up, cars easing into traffic, a few early risers stepping out with headphones in, and the faint smell of roasted beans drifting from the shop before he even reached the door. He felt a strange mix of calm and restlessness, the kind that always settled in his chest before he stepped into public spaces. The coffee shop had become one of the few places that allowed him to disappear from his old world. Here, he wasn't the wealthy one. He wasn't the fallen one. He was just a man trying to get through the day. And though the lie of the chair weighed on him more each week, this quiet corner of the city still felt like the only place he could breathe without performing for anyone. He approached the doorway, mentally preparing himself for the narrow frame he never got used to. The front door swung inward, but the space past it was tight, too tight for ease, just wide enough to make entering a slow, controlled process. He positioned his hands on the wheels, guiding himself forward, but the metal rims scraped lightly against the doorframe. The right wheel stuck just slightly, catching the wood. He adjusted, tried again, and felt the same resistance. A practiced sigh slipped from his chest. He hated pretending to struggle. He hated realizing some part of the struggle wasn't pretend anymore. The weight of that truth pressed against him as he attempted another angle. Then, a presence. A hand reached forward, touching the door before he even noticed someone had approached. The door eased open a bit wider. A warm voice followed. "Here, let me help you." He didn't have to look up to know who it was. The gentle tone, the calm ease, the soft confidence were unmistakably Brenda's. She stood with one hand braced on the door, the other holding her laptop bag against her hip. Her eyes met his with the same effortless warmth he remembered. No hesitation, no awkward smile meant to disguise discomfort, just simple kindness. "Thank you," he murmured. "No problem," she said, stepping aside just enough to give him room but close enough to steady the door if needed. He maneuvered the chair again, and this time the wheel slipped through the frame more smoothly. When he cleared the doorway, he turned slightly toward her. "You saved me back there," he joked lightly. She chuckled. "You looked like you had it, but sometimes even strong people need a little help." The line hit him harder than she intended, stirring something quiet inside him, the kind of recognition he hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't flattering him. She wasn't patronizing him. She meant what she said. He followed her deeper into the cafe, where sunlight slipped through the windows and cast gentle shapes across the wooden tables. Brenda set up her laptop at her usual spot near the wall outlet, and he rolled toward the corner he favored, a seat with a clear view of the door but enough privacy to settle into his own thoughts. After a few minutes, Brenda looked over at him again. "You want anything?" "I'm heading to the counter." He blinked, caught off guard by the offer. Most people asked him if he needed help out of pity. Brenda asked out of courtesy, the same way she'd ask anyone else. "Just a black coffee," he replied. She nodded and walked off, her steps steady and familiar. He watched her move through the line, greeting the barista with a smile he realized brightened the room more than the sunlight did. She didn't seem like someone who forced joy. She carried it naturally, in the way she interacted, in the way she listened, in the way she existed. When she returned with both drinks, she placed his gently on the table beside him. "Thank you," he said again, softer this time. "You're welcome," she said, settling back into her chair. For a few minutes, the only sounds were keyboard clicks, steaming milk, and the soft buzz of conversation. Jeremy watched her type, noticing the slight crease in her brow when she focused, the way she occasionally bit her lip as she read over her work, the subtle sway of her foot under the table. These details shouldn't have mattered to him, not while he was living a lie. But they did. They mattered more than he wanted them to. After a while, Brenda looked up. "This your first time here?" she asked. He shook his head. "I come here a lot, actually. I like the energy. It feels normal." "Normal is underrated," she said with a small smile. "Normal means peace, and trust me, peace is rare these days." He laughed softly. "You sound like my grandmother." She raised a brow. "Is that a compliment, or—" "A compliment," he said quickly. "Definitely." Her smile widened, and the moment stretched, not awkward, not forced, but calm. It was the kind of quiet connection that felt like the opening of a door neither of them knew existed. Jeremy sensed something unfamiliar stirring inside him, a desire to extend the moment, to speak more, to reveal something honest for the first time in months, but he caught himself before he could say anything that didn't align with the life he claimed to live now. "What about you?" he asked instead. "You work from here a lot?" She nodded. "Yeah. My place gets quiet, and sometimes quiet is good, but sometimes it makes you think too much. Here, the noise helps balance things out." He understood that more than she knew. "Besides," she added, "coffee is my weakness." He chuckled. "There are worse weaknesses." Their eyes met again. Something subtle passed between them, not romantic yet, not heavy, but meaningful in a way that rooted itself gently in both of them. Jeremy felt something soften in his chest, a thought rising before he could stop it. She sees me. Not the facade, not the chair, not the story he constructed to test the world. Just him. Brenda didn't know it yet, but she had just become the first person in years to make him question whether his test might end up testing him instead. The cafe had become Brenda's unofficial office, a place where deadlines felt softer and the hum of grinders and quiet conversations made her workday feel less confined. Most afternoons she settled into the same corner table with her laptop open, iced coffee within reach, and her focus spread between customer tickets and the flow of people drifting in and out. But lately, the energy around her felt a little different, because Jeremy had become part of her routine, not planned, not arranged, but naturally woven into her days like sunlight slowly shifting across a room. He was already there when she arrived one Tuesday afternoon, seated near the window with a book open on his lap. She paused for half a second before walking in, noticing the way the light caught the edge of his jaw, giving him a softness that didn't match his carefully guarded demeanor. When he looked up and smiled, it wasn't a wide smile, just enough to signal recognition, enough to make her steps feel lighter. "You're early today," she said, placing her bag on her usual chair. "Couldn't sit at home anymore," he said. "Too quiet." She laughed as she opened her laptop. "Trust me, I understand that." Their conversations started the same way they usually did, with comments about work, the weather, or some funny thing she overheard earlier in the day. But they never stayed there for long. Every time they talked, they drifted towards something deeper without meaning to. Jeremy asked questions that made her think. Brenda answered in ways that made him pause. She told him about growing up with her cousins, weekend parties, and the loud, loving chaos of family gatherings. She described cookouts where music blasted loud enough for the whole block to enjoy, and aunties who could read someone's intentions by how they walked through the door. "What kind of music do you listen to?" Jeremy asked one afternoon, leaning forward slightly as if her answer mattered more than he let on. "Mostly R&B and Afro-Caribbean stuff," she said. "Depends on my mood." "Why?" "I've never listened to much of it. My family liked, well, let's just say the playlists were predictable." He smiled lightly. She laughed. "Nothing wrong with predictable. But I might have to educate you." "I'd like that," he said quietly. There was a softness in his voice she hadn't heard before, something honest slipping through the cracks of the persona he usually held together with steady hands. And he didn't just ask about her music. He asked about food, what dishes she grew up eating, which restaurants in Atlanta had the best fried fish, which bakery made the cornbread she swore tasted like childhood. Every answer she offered felt like she was handing him small pieces of her world, and he accepted each one without judgment, without pretending to already know, without making her explain why they mattered. In return, he shared moments of his own life, but always in careful doses. He told her about the winters he grew up with, how the snow piled so high it swallowed mailboxes, and how the cold stung in a way that made stepping outside feel like a risky decision. He told her about summers by the water, the kind of quiet that settled over the shoreline at dusk. His upbringing felt far from hers, yet something about the contrast didn't separate them. It fascinated her. Their worlds were different, but their conversations felt like they met somewhere in the middle, where neither culture overshadowed the other. As days passed and their meetings became more frequent, Brenda realized something unexpected. She felt at ease around him. Not the polite ease she had with coworkers, not the guarded comfort she used with dates she tried to give a chance, but a deep, simple ease, the kind that made her shoulders relax and her mind quiet. She noticed things about him she didn't expect to notice. How he listened without rushing her. How he smiled more with his eyes than his mouth. How he chose his words with intention, as if he knew how easily words could be misused. And he noticed things about her. How she tilted her head when she was curious. How she joked when she was nervous. How she carried strength and softness with equal weight. One Thursday afternoon, as they sat across from each other, Brenda caught herself watching the way he tapped his finger lightly on his cup, a small habit, barely noticeable, but calming in its repetition. She wondered briefly why she felt drawn to such small details. Maybe because in the middle of her ordinary day, something about him didn't feel ordinary at all. That thought lingered longer than she expected, and though neither of them named it yet, a spark had begun forming in the space between their conversations. Quiet, steady, real. Brenda didn't plan on inviting Jeremy to anything, especially not a wedding, yet the thought had been slipping into her mind more and more as the date approached. Her cousin had been calling every other day, reminding her to come early, checking in about her dress, and of course, dropping the ultimate question. You bringing somebody this time or nah? Brenda always dodged it with a laugh, but the truth was more complicated. She was tired of walking into family events alone, tired of aunties whispering behind folding fans, tired of cousins nudging her with, "Girl, you too fine to keep coming solo." Tired of being the proof that independence sometimes came with assumptions about loneliness. She didn't feel lonely, but she did feel tired of explaining that she wasn't settling. She was choosing, and lately, Jeremy's presence lingered in her thoughts longer than she expected. It wasn't romantic in any clear way. Not yet, but he made her feel lighter, and she liked that. One afternoon at the cafe, she found herself watching him as he talked about something that made him laugh. A rare moment when his guard lowered enough for her to see the ease he rarely showed the world. He had this quiet way of drawing her attention, like a calm that reached out for hers without demanding anything. While he spoke, she felt something shift inside her, something she didn't immediately understand. She almost shook her head to clear the thought, but the feeling stayed. As she scrolled through her emails, one from her cousin popped up. Wedding rehearsal reminder, 2 weeks. No excuses, Brenda. Love you. She exhaled sharply through her nose, half amused, half exasperated. Jeremy looked up. You okay? She turned her laptop slightly away. Just my cousin reminding me about her wedding. She thinks I need supervision. He chuckled. Big families usually do. Oh, you have no idea, she said, rolling her eyes playfully. It's a whole experience. What kind of experience? He asked, genuinely curious. The kind where you show up alone, and every auntie starts whispering like your life is in danger, she joked. I already know what they're gonna say. Brenda, why you don't bring nobody? You're beautiful, baby. Stop being so picky. He smiled. Sounds like they care. They do, she said softly. Just loudly. Jeremy laughed again, but she noticed something in his eyes. Interest, not in the gossip, but in the way she navigated her world. He listened with the kind of attention that made her feel like her words mattered beyond small talk. She didn't know what pulled her toward the next thought, but suddenly, inspiration struck with a force she couldn't explain. Hey, Jeremy, she said, voice casual at first. Random question. He lifted his eyebrows slightly. Okay. Her heart beat a little faster. The idea felt reckless and natural all at once. So, would you maybe want to come with me to the wedding? Jeremy froze, not dramatically but enough for her to feel it. His hand stilled on the wheel, his expression shifting into something unsure. You want me to go with you? He asked, slow and cautious. She shrugged lightly, trying to hide the flicker of nerves she didn't expect. Yeah, as my date. Nothing too serious, just someone I wouldn't mind spending the day with. Jeremy didn't answer immediately, and the silence wasn't empty. It was full of something she couldn't read. His throat tightened slightly before he spoke. Brenda, I don't know what to say. You can say no, she said quickly, lifting her palms. Seriously, no pressure at all. It's not that, he replied, shaking his head gently. I'm just surprised. A faint, vulnerable smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No one's invited me anywhere in a while. Not like this. Not genuinely. Brenda blinked, taken aback by the honesty in his tone. She hadn't expected that. She also hadn't expected the way her chest tightened when she saw the look in his eyes, a mix of gratitude and confusion, as if the invitation meant more to him than she realized. So, she said softly, is that a yes? Jeremy let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for much longer than a moment. Yes, he said finally. I'd like to go. With you. Brenda smiled, a real warm smile she didn't try to hide. He returned it, though his was smaller, touched with something quietly emotional. Just promise me your family won't bite, he joked, trying to lighten the weight in the air. Oh, they might, she said, laughing. But only the fun ones. Jeremy laughed too, but the emotion behind it lingered. A yes meant stepping deeper into the lie he built. A yes meant entering her world while hiding pieces of his. And yet, he wanted this. He wanted her company. He wanted the feeling she gave him, something unforced, something honest in a life where honesty had become rare. Across the table, Brenda felt a soft warmth settle in her chest. She hadn't made this kind of impulsive choice in years. But something about Jeremy made the risk feel strangely right. The days following Jeremy's yes carried a different kind of energy, the kind that settles quietly under the surface, changing the rhythm of ordinary moments. Brenda didn't admit it out loud, but she found herself looking forward to seeing him in the cafe in a way she didn't expect. And Jeremy, despite the anxiety knotting quietly in his stomach, kept showing up, earlier than usual. It wasn't long before their conversations began blending into something deeper, something that stretched beyond the walls of the coffee shop. One afternoon, Brenda closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms above her head. Okay, she sighed dramatically. I'm starving. Please tell me you've eaten. Jeremy glanced at his watch. Not yet. Good, she said, standing up. Come on. I'm taking you somewhere. Jeremy's brows lifted slightly. Where? You'll see, she said with a grin. Trust me. He hesitated only for a beat, then nodded. Lead the way. She guided him out of the cafe and down the sidewalk, toward a corner restaurant he'd passed many times, but never entered. The smell of seasoned fish, warm breading, and fried chicken wafted through the air even before they reached the door. A handwritten sign taped to the window read, "We closed when the last piece is sold." Inside, the place was buzzing, families laughing in booths, friends arguing over whose plate looked better, cooks calling out orders with the ease of practiced rhythm. Brenda looked back at him. Welcome to real Atlanta comfort food. His expression softened into something curious and open. This place feels alive. Exactly, she said. Now come taste something that'll change your life. They found a table near the window, and Brenda handled the ordering since she knew the menu by heart. When the food arrived, golden fish fillets, cabbage, macaroni, and a side of cornbread, Jeremy stared at the plate as if he wasn't sure where to begin. Start with the fish, she suggested, nudging his fork closer. He took a bite, and his eyes widened slightly. Okay, this is incredible. Brenda laughed. See? I wouldn't lie about food. The ease between them came naturally, like two people slipping into a conversation they'd been having for years. She told him about childhood meals with her aunties, about how the entire neighborhood could smell when someone was frying fish on a Sunday. Jeremy listened, absorbing every detail as though he was learning a new language, one he actually wanted to speak. When he finished his plate, he looked at her with genuine appreciation. I never would have tried this on my own, he admitted. That's why you have me, she said, playful but warm. He chuckled, but something deeper flickered beneath his smile, a quiet gratitude he didn't fully voice. Later that week, Jeremy invited her to a different kind of food experience, something from his own childhood. Not a restaurant, not a fancy dining space, just a small bakery tucked between two larger storefronts, one he claimed made pastries that reminded him of home. As they sat outside with warm pastries wrapped in paper, he told her stories about growing up in Connecticut, days when snow piled so high he had to push it away from the door just to go outside, nights when his family gathered near the fireplace, wrapped in blankets while storms rattled the windows. Brenda listened closely. His childhood sounded cold in more ways than weather. There were beautiful parts, sure, but she could hear the distance in his tone when he described gatherings that looked perfect on the outside, yet felt hollow in the center. "Did you like it?" she asked softly. He paused, turning the question over in his mind. "I liked the quiet moments," he said. "But there weren't many of those." Brenda didn't pry further. She simply nodded, letting him know his honesty was safe with her. Their cultural exchange didn't end with food and stories. One evening she played him a playlist filled with the music she grew up hearing. Smooth R&B, drums that made the room pulse, voices that carried emotion thick enough to feel through the speakers. Jeremy listened with surprising attentiveness, his foot tapping lightly against the wheel of his chair. "These songs, they feel warm," he said. She smiled. "That's the point." He glanced at her, his tone softening. "You carry that same warmth, you know." Brenda's breath caught for a second. Compliments like that didn't come from him often, and when they did, they arrived unpolished and sincere. She didn't respond right away. She needed a moment to steady the flutter in her chest. As their days together stretched on, she began to notice something else, the way her mind stopped focusing on Jeremy's chair. Not because she ignored it, not because she didn't understand the challenges it represented, but because it simply wasn't the thing that defined him in her eyes. She saw the way he thought before speaking, the quiet humor that surfaced when he relaxed, the way he appreciated parts of her culture without treating them like curiosities. And Jeremy, he noticed something too. He saw her watching him with a type of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. She didn't treat him as fragile. She didn't treat him as misunderstood. She treated him as a man, whole, present, human. That truth unsettled him, because the closer she got to seeing him, the harder it became to maintain the lie he built his life around. Each time she laughed at one of his jokes, each time she invited him into her world with ease and confidence, each time she looked at him with warmth instead of pity, he felt the weight of the chair grow heavier. Jeremy feared the moment the lie would collide with the trust she was building, but he also didn't want to lose whatever this was, this gentle, growing connection that neither of them named but both quietly felt. Their worlds were different. Their experiences were different, but in the space between laughter, stories, and meals that bridged cultures, something undeniable had begun taking shape. Something neither of them could ignore. Something that would follow them straight into the wedding night that changed everything. The wedding venue sat on a hill outside Atlanta, glowing beneath the late afternoon sun. From the outside, it looked like a celebration already in motion. Music floating through open doors, guests in bright colors laughing as they walked in pairs toward the entrance. The rhythm of Afrobeat pulsed softly from inside, steady enough to make the air feel warm with anticipation. Brenda stepped out of the car and took a moment to steady herself. The gold dress she wore caught the light just right, glimmering against her skin. Her hair framed her face in gentle waves, and the confidence in her stance made it clear she had not come to fade into the background tonight. She looked radiant, unmistakably radiant. Jeremy watched her from beside the car door, still in his chair, still adjusting the sleeve of his jacket. He couldn't stop staring, not in a way that overwhelmed her, but in a way that made him quietly grateful to be there at all. "You ready?" she asked, turning toward him with a soft smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied. She stepped behind him, her hands resting gently on the handles of his chair, and together they rolled toward the entrance. As they reached the double doors, a swell of music greeted them, the rhythmic beat of drums layered under melodies that made the room feel alive. Inside, the venue sparkled. Candles reflected against shimmering gold decor. Guests swayed lightly to the music, laughing, greeting each other, sharing stories as if they had been waiting for this moment all season. It was the kind of wedding where joy wasn't just visible, it was shared. The moment they entered, eyes turned toward them. It wasn't subtle. It was the classic black family reaction. Quick glances, widened eyes, whispers sliding between lips faster than a text message. Oh, Brenda brought someone. She finally brought a date? Who's the tall man in the chair? He handsome, though. Well, okay, Miss Brenda. Brenda inhaled quietly, fighting the instinct to shrink, but she kept her shoulders back and her head high. For once, she actually felt proud to walk in with someone by her side, even if she didn't know exactly what Jeremy was becoming to her. Jeremy, meanwhile, was taking everything in with a mix of awe and uncertainty. The colors, the laughter, the warmth, the rhythm. This wasn't the kind of wedding he grew up attending. There was no stiff silence, no forced pleasantries, no cold elegance meant to impress. Here, people hugged before speaking. Here, children danced before the ceremony even started. Here, emotions didn't need permission to be loud. It overwhelmed him, but in a way that made him feel included, not out of place. Brenda bent down slightly so he could hear her over the music. "You good?" He nodded, though the truth was more complicated. "Just taking everything in. Your family knows how to make an entrance feel alive." "Alive is one word for it," she joked, rolling him forward a bit more. "Be prepared for questions. Lots of them." As if on cue, two of her cousins spotted her from across the room and hurried over, practically glowing with curiosity. "Brenda," one exclaimed. "Girl, look at you." "And who is this?" the other asked, eyeing Jeremy with a smile warm enough to soften steel. Brenda introduced him with calm confidence, and Jeremy offered a polite smile in return. Her cousins gave him the once-over, not judgmental, just evaluative in that familiar family way, before approving him with nods that made Brenda laugh under her breath. "Y'all behave," she warned. "No promises," one cousin whispered, already walking away to spread the news that Brenda had arrived with a man. As Brenda pushed him deeper into the venue, Jeremy leaned slightly toward her. "Your family is enthusiastic," she snorted. "Oh, trust me, they're being polite right now." They shared a quiet moment of laughter, a moment that softened the tension building in Jeremy's chest. He didn't want to overthink this. He didn't want to let fear rob him of the warmth he felt walking beside her. "You look beautiful," he said, almost too softly. Brenda paused in place, her breath catching for a brief moment. Compliments were nothing new. Men had offered them before. But this one felt different. It didn't feel performative. It didn't feel expected. It felt honest. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm and a little shy. Before they could say more, the lights lowered slightly and the ceremony music shifted. Guests began heading toward their seats, taking their places for the entrance of the bride. Brenda guided Jeremy to a spot near the aisle, the perfect vantage point to see everything without being blocked by taller guests. As they settled in, the room quieted just enough for the excitement to thicken. Soft drums echoed through the hall. Guests leaned forward. Children hushed. Something inside both Brenda and Jeremy settled into stillness. It was the calm before a moment neither of them realized would change their lives forever. The ceremony ended with a burst of cheers, laughter, and applause as the newly married couple walked down the aisle hand in hand. Music filled the room again, louder now, richer, inviting everyone into the celebration that had been waiting to erupt. Guests shifted toward the reception hall, drifting in small groups while the wedding party prepared for photos. Brenda stayed beside Jeremy, guiding him through the flow of family and friends. The decorations glittered under soft lighting. Gold accents, floral arrangements blooming across every table, long white drapes swaying gently from above. Everything shimmered with warmth. "You okay?" Brenda asked as they reached their table. Jeremy nodded, but his eyes were wide with surprise. "This is more beautiful than I expected." "That's black weddings for you," she teased. "We don't do halfway." He smiled, and for a moment the tension that had been coiled inside him seemed to loosen. They settled into their seats as servers brought out appetizers, and the room filled with chatter and clinking glasses. Brenda's cousins waved at her from across the room, already trying to guess what her relationship with Jeremy really was. After a few minutes, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Aight, family, we need everyone to give some love to our newlyweds. Let's welcome them into the room." Guests rose to their feet as the bride and groom danced their way inside, moving with joy so infectious that even Jeremy found himself smiling and tapping his fingers lightly on his armrest. Brenda clapped, cheering loudly, her laughter effortlessly blending into the rhythm of the moment. As the newlyweds reached the center of the room, the DJ dimmed the lights slightly, signaling the start of toasts. Brenda leaned closer to Jeremy. "You're about to hear the funniest speeches ever given by people who love each other too much." "Oh. Should I prepare myself?" he asked. "You should. she said. "My family doesn't hold back." The maid of honor began with heartfelt words about sisterhood, childhood memories, and seeing the bride grow into someone who knew how to love without fear. The best man followed, cracking jokes and making the whole room erupt in laughter. Jeremy laughed too, not politely, but genuinely. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something instead of watching from the edges. He felt included, welcomed, even protected by the warmth that surrounded Brenda's family. But the longer he sat there, the more something inside him tugged at his chest. Not discomfort, not fear exactly, just a quiet stirring he wasn't prepared for. He watched Brenda as she looked toward the bride, eyes glistening with admiration and love for her family. Her hands folded neatly on the table, her smile soft, her expression peaceful. She looked happy, and that happiness pulled on something inside him he had been trying to ignore. As the toasts ended, the DJ called for the first slow dance. The lights softened again, casting a warm glow around the dance floor. Couples began to rise from their seats, drifting toward the center of the room. Brenda turned to Jeremy with a gentle smile. "You want to head closer? Better view." He nodded, and she pushed him toward the edge of the dance floor where they found a comfortable spot. The room dimmed, the music slowed, and the newlyweds glided across the floor, moving as if the moment had been waiting for them their whole lives. Brenda rested her hand lightly on Jeremy's shoulder as she watched. He looked up at her, feeling her warmth through the fabric of his jacket. Something in his chest tightened, a mix of longing, gratitude, and an ache he didn't have the vocabulary to name. "You okay?" she asked softly. He swallowed, suddenly aware of how fragile the truth beneath him felt. "Yeah, this is all new to me." "Weddings?" she asked. "No," he said, shaking his head gently. Feeling this welcome, Brenda's expression softened, surprise flickering through her eyes. She leaned closer, her voice warm. "Jeremy, nobody here sees you as anything but a guest who came with me. That's a good thing." He nodded, but he knew the real reason for his unease, the lie that clung to him with every breath. The chair, the story behind it, the secret that grew heavier with every passing hour. The music changed again, shifting into another slow track. A few couples near them swayed in small circles, their movements easy and unhurried. Brenda hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever miss dancing?" The question hit him unexpectedly. He blinked. His throat tightened. Even though he wasn't physically limited, hearing it aloud forced him to confront the deception he had been carrying. She realized her question might have touched something tender, and added quickly, "You don't have to answer that." "I'm sorry." "No," he said quietly. "It's okay." His voice softened. "I guess I just miss feeling part of something. Moments like this." Brenda nodded, understanding more than he said. She knelt slightly beside him, bringing her face closer to his so he didn't have to look up. "You're part of this moment," she said. "Right now, with me." Something shifted between them, subtle but unmistakable. The music, the dim lights, the way she looked at him with sincerity instead of pity, created a warmth he wasn't prepared for. Jeremy felt his heart slipping, gently, quietly, but undeniably, into dangerous territory. Brenda seemed to sense it too, because she held his gaze for a beat too long before looking back at the dance floor. Her hands still rested on his shoulder, but now the touch carried a softness that wasn't accidental. The DJ called for more couples to join the floor, and the room filled with motion. Brenda remained beside him, her breath close enough for him to feel. The closeness wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It was simply happening, and both of them felt the pull. It wasn't a fall yet, but it was dangerously close. The wedding reception reached its height as more guests filled the dance floor, moving with a joy that seemed to radiate across the room. Laughter rippled through the air. Glasses clinked in cheerful rhythm. Couples swayed to the slow songs, then broke into wide smiles when the DJ spun upbeat tracks. But amid all that warmth, a quiet shift lived inside Jeremy's chest, a pressure, a tightening, the kind born from knowing a lie was sitting too close to something real. Brenda didn't see it. She was too busy letting herself enjoy the moment, too busy adjusting Jeremy's chair so he could get a better view of the celebrations, too busy leaning close when she wanted to say something over the music. Her presence made the room feel gentler, but for Jeremy, the gentleness made the truth harder to carry. The DJ announced the next dance, a dedication to the couple's parents, and the room softened again. Lights dimmed into a warm glow. The music slowed into a soft melody that filled every corner of the hall. Brenda watched the dance, eyes tender, her hand resting lightly on Jeremy's armrest. She wasn't touching him exactly, but the closeness, the nearness, the intention of her body beside his, it all made his pulse thicken. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded, though he wasn't. Just thinking, about what? He opened his mouth, but nothing truthful came out. Because how could he say, "I'm terrified of you learning who I really am. Terrified of losing what you see in me. Terrified because this night feels like the first honest warmth I've had in years, built on a lie." Instead, he said, "Just enjoying this." Brenda smiled, soft, trusting, unguarded. That single look nearly undid him. The music faded into applause as the dance ended, and the bride and groom prepared for the bouquet toss. The crowd buzzed, adjusting chairs, gathering near the dance floor. Brenda laughed as she stood. "I'm not catching anything tonight. My aunties already think I'm next." "You don't want to be next?" Jeremy teased. "Not today," she said. Today is her moment. He nodded, watching her move with ease through her family, watching how people gravitated toward her, how she blended into the crowd without losing herself. Then, the shift happened. A slight breeze wafted through the hall as the doors opened, and someone new stepped inside, someone who caught sight of Jeremy immediately. Jeremy saw him too. His breath stalled. His hands froze on the wheels. His entire body went still. The man was dressed sharply, clearly here for the wedding, but the shock on his face wasn't about the ceremony. It was about Jeremy. He mouthed something like "no way," then began walking toward him, slow but certain. Jeremy felt the floor tilt. He had never planned for someone from his old world to show up here. Brenda returned to his side just as the man reached them. "Hey, you good?" she asked, noticing the sudden tension in his face. Jeremy didn't answer. The man stood before them, disbelief pouring from his expression as he stared down at the wheelchair. "Jeremy?" he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Why are you in that chair?" Brenda blinked, confused. Jeremy's throat tightened. The man continued, voice rising with each word. "I haven't seen you in months, and now you're pretending." "Stop," Jeremy snapped, his voice sharp in a way Brenda had never heard. But it was too late. People around them turned. Conversations halted. The DJ lowered the volume as heads swiveled toward the commotion. Brenda felt her stomach drop. Jeremy, what is he talking about? He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't find a lie fast enough to patch the truth crashing through the room. The man stepped closer, eyes locked on him. "You can stand. What are you doing? Why?" "Enough," Jeremy said again, louder, his voice cracking. But the damage had already begun ripping through the room like a quiet shock wave. Brenda stepped back, her hand slipping from the chair handle. "Jeremy," she whispered, "what is he saying?" And then, the moment he never planned for, the moment he had hoped to avoid until he found the courage to confess properly, arrived without mercy. He stood, slowly, fully, easily. Gasps erupted across the hall. A woman screamed softly. The DJ stopped the music entirely. The room froze. Brenda's breath caught so sharply it felt like her ribs stopped moving. She stared at the man standing before her, not weak, not injured, not unable. Standing. "Brenda." His voice shook. "Please, I can explain." She shook her head, her eyes filling not with anger, but disbelief. "You told me. You let me believe." The rest of her words dissolved as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. Jeremy stepped toward her. She stepped back. "Brenda, please, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I never wanted to lie to you. I needed to know if anyone could see me without the money, without the image, without the truth," she said, her voice cracking. Her heart wasn't breaking because he could walk. Her heart was breaking because he didn't trust her with reality. The room watched silently. "You lied to me," she whispered. "Every day. It wasn't about you. It was." "That makes it worse," she said, tears threatening. "Because I actually liked you, and you stood in front of me pretending to be someone you're not." He reached out. She stepped away again. Her voice softened into something wounded. "Why did you think you needed to lie to be worthy of kindness?" Jeremy had no answer, and that silence hurt more than the truth itself. The celebration around them dimmed into the background as Brenda did the only thing she could do. She walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just heartbroken, and Jeremy watched her disappear through the crowd, knowing the truth had finally caught him. Brenda didn't run out of the reception hall. She walked. Steady, controlled, intentional. But inside, she felt as if something had cracked open so suddenly she hadn't even had time to breathe through the pain. She pushed through the double doors and stepped into the open night, where soft garden lights lit a pathway winding between rows of trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. The music from inside spilled faintly through the walls, muffled by distance, replaced by the quiet hum of cicadas and the soft rustle of leaves. Her chest rose and fell unevenly as she stopped near a stone bench, gripping its edge with both hands. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Tears felt too simple for the weight sitting inside her ribs. Behind her, the door swung open again. "Brenda, please," Jeremy called out, his voice strained as he hurried forward on foot, a sound she wasn't used to. Footsteps, not wheels. She didn't turn. Not yet. "Brenda, I need to talk to you," he said, breath uneven as he slowed to a few steps behind her. She finally looked over her shoulder, her expression tight. "You shouldn't have followed me. I couldn't just stay in there while you walked out." She shook her head. "You didn't have a problem staying silent while I trusted every word you told me." The words cut him, and he flinched because he knew he deserved them. "Brenda, please, just listen," he said, voice cracking slightly. "Why?" she asked, turning fully now. "Why should I listen when everything you told me was built on a lie?" He stepped closer, but she lifted a hand, stopping him. The distance between them had never felt so wide. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I wasn't pretending because of your world or who you are. I started pretending before I even met you. I didn't know you then. I didn't know anyone real." "You didn't know me," she repeated, her voice sharp with hurt. "But you let me pour parts of myself out to you. You let me believe you were living with something you weren't. You let me feel empathy for a struggle you didn't have. And for what?" He swallowed hard. "To know who I could trust." Brenda closed her eyes briefly, shaking her head. "Trust goes both ways, Jeremy. How can you expect someone to give you honesty when you never offer it?" He stepped closer again, cautiously, as if approaching a fragile thing he knew he had already damaged. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I see that. I see how selfish it was. I was trying to protect myself, but I ended up hurting someone who didn't deserve it." She listened, not because she wanted to forgive him, but because she needed to hear whatever truth he finally had to offer. "You treated me like I was safe," Jeremy continued. "You were kind. You didn't see weakness in the chair, just a person. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't expect anyone to treat me like that again." Brenda stepped back, her voice rising. "So, you lied to keep me close?" "No," he said quickly. "I lied before I met you, and then when I met you, I didn't know how to undo it without losing you." "That's the problem," she whispered. "You made that choice for me." Jeremy froze because he knew she was right. Tears began to gather in her eyes, glistening under the soft garden lights, but her expression wasn't angry. It was wounded, disappointed, as if a part of her had believed in him more than she realized. "I trusted you," she said, voice trembling. "I let you into parts of my life I don't share easily. And you stood beside me pretending to carry a burden you chose to perform." Jeremy's breathing hitched. "I didn't choose it to hurt you. I was trying to understand if kindness still existed, if people still saw people, if—" "Kindness isn't a test," she cut in. "You don't trick people to see if they're good. You give them honesty. You give them truth. You give them the chance to choose you with open eyes." He looked down at his hands, suddenly realizing how empty they felt when he wasn't hiding behind the chair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Brenda closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. "I need space." Jeremy's head jerked up. "Please, Brenda, don't leave like this." "I have to," she said softly. "Because right now, I don't even know who I was standing beside in there. I don't know which parts of you were real." "All of them," he said desperately. "Except the lie, except the chair. Everything else, every moment, was real." "But the lie is what introduced you to me," she replied. "It colored everything that came after." He reached out a hand, but she stepped away again. Her voice softened to a breaking point. "I cared about you, Jeremy. That's why this hurts." Those words struck him deeper than any confrontation could have. She turned then, slowly, painfully, and began walking down the garden path, away from the lights, away from the music, away from him. Jeremy took a step forward as if to follow, but stopped himself. Because for the first time since he created the lie, he understood something. This wasn't his moment to chase. It was his moment to face what he had broken. And Brenda walked into the night, leaving him standing alone among the flowers, finally confronted by the truth he had spent months hiding from. The night of the wedding replayed in Brenda's mind long after she walked away from Jeremy in the garden. Days passed, and the memory still pressed against her chest like a bruise she hadn't given permission to form. She returned to her routines, logged in for work, visited her aunties on Sundays, and went about life as usual. But something inside her had shifted. She kept replaying the moment he stood, the moment the lie broke open, the moment her trust cracked. Her cousins tried to get her to talk about it. "You really liked him, didn't you?" one asked gently. Brenda didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice not to tremble. Meanwhile, Jeremy's life felt like it came to a sudden halt. The morning after the wedding, he woke up in his penthouse with a heaviness in his chest he hadn't felt since the day he realized his old world had abandoned him. Except this time, the ache wasn't from being left behind. It was from watching someone walk away who actually mattered. He sent Brenda a text, then another, the next day, then a third, shorter than the first two. None of them were manipulative. None of them begged. They simply carried truth. "Brenda, I'm sorry. I miss our conversations. I shouldn't have put you in that position. I hope you're okay." She read every single one. Didn't respond to any of them. Her silence wasn't punishment. It was protection, for her heart, for her peace, for the boundaries she needed to rebuild. But Jeremy didn't disappear. He gave her space, just as she asked, but he didn't retreat into the lie or the loneliness that once defined him. Instead, he decided the only way to move forward was through honesty, consistently, patiently, without expectation. So he stopped pretending. He went places on foot now, no longer hiding behind the chair that once acted as armor. He visited the coffee shop regularly, even though he wasn't sure if Brenda would ever show up. He stayed near the window, hoping she might walk through the door even if she never approached him. 2 weeks passed before he saw her again. She entered the cafe humming softly to herself, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't notice him at first. When her eyes finally landed on him, her steps faltered, not dramatically, but enough for him to feel the air shift. He stood as soon as she looked his way. The gesture alone made her swallow hard. He didn't speak, didn't approach, didn't force anything. He simply nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement, then stepped aside to let her move freely. She gave a small nod back, then went to her usual table. They said nothing more that day, but that silent exchange was the first sign that the ice around her heart had begun to thaw, not melt, not break, but soften enough to let recognition through. Later that week, Brenda visited her aunties. The evening unfolded as it usually did, pots simmering on the stove, loud laughter bouncing off the walls, and unsolicited advice served alongside cornbread. One auntie noticed the heaviness in Brenda's face and nudged her gently. "Baby, what's weighing on you?" Brenda hesitated, then sighed. "I cared about someone who lied to me." Her aunties exchanged knowing looks. They didn't pry for details, not yet. Instead, one spoke softly. "Did he lie because he wanted to hurt you, or because he didn't know how to tell the truth?" Brenda didn't answer. She didn't know the right words. Another auntie chimed in. "Sometimes people hide behind foolish decisions because they're afraid of showing the real them. Doesn't make it right, but it does mean they human." The conversation stayed with her long after she left their house. Jeremy wasn't spared either. A few days after the wedding, one of Brenda's cousins spotted him near the cafe and, recognizing him, approached with a fierceness he didn't expect. "You're Jeremy, right?" He nodded cautiously. She folded her arms. "You hurt her." "I know," he said quietly. "What were you thinking? She don't open up to people like that." He didn't try to defend himself. "I wasn't thinking. Not clearly, and she deserved better." Her expression softened slightly, not approval, but acknowledgement. "Fix it," she said. Then she walked away. Jeremy replayed that encounter for days. The barbecue happened at the end of the 3rd week, a community event hosted every year by Brenda's family. Brenda almost didn't go, but her cousins insisted, saying she needed fresh air and laughter. She agreed reluctantly. The smell of grilled chicken and seasoned ribs floated in the air. Music thumped gently in the background, children ran through sprinklers, elders played cards under tents, and cousins danced while teasing one another. Brenda felt herself relax into the familiarity of it all. She was laughing with one cousin when she felt a shift in the atmosphere. a subtle change in the energy around her. She turned and froze. Jeremy was there. He stood at the edge of the yard, unsure, cautious, but present. He hadn't come to force a conversation. He stayed back, hands in his pockets, watching respectfully from a distance, only approaching when one of the aunties called him over with an approving nod. "Oh, so this the young man we heard about," one auntie said, eyeing him up and down. Jeremy swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Well," she said, "you got some explaining to do. But you also got courage for showing your face here." Her words weren't unkind. They were honest and oddly grounding. Brenda watched from where she stood. Jeremy's presence didn't feel like another wound. It felt like a beginning. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just the first step toward understanding. And that was enough to make the ache inside her chest shift. Just a little. The barbecue marked the first time Brenda and Jeremy occupied the same space without the weight of immediate tension between them. They didn't rush toward each other, didn't force a conversation, didn't pretend everything was fine. They simply allowed themselves to exist in the same environment, cautiously, respectfully, quietly. Brenda stayed near the grill with her cousins, watching Jeremy from a distance. He wasn't inserting himself into her world. He was stepping lightly, observing, taking cues instead of assuming. He greeted her family with humility, answered questions honestly, and didn't shy away when the aunties asked the hard things. "Why'd you lie in the first place?" one asked. He didn't use excuses, didn't rush to soften the truth. "I was afraid of being used again," he said simply. "Afraid nobody actually cared who I was without the money and image." Brenda heard his answer from where she stood, and the honesty tugged at something inside her. He wasn't trying to win pity. He wasn't trying to convince anyone to take his side. He was just finally being human. Later in the evening, while cousins danced near the speakers and children ran around with dripping popsicles, Brenda found herself walking toward the picnic table where Jeremy sat alone, sipping a soda and watching the festivities with a quiet smile. He looked up the moment she approached, and something gentle flickered in his eyes. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied, his voice steady but cautious. Brenda sat down across from him. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a seat. But the significance wasn't lost on either of them. For a moment, they didn't speak. They watched the people around them. The laughter, the dancing, the cousins playfully arguing over who burned the chicken. The messy, joyful noise of Brenda's world wrapped around them both. Finally, Brenda broke the silence. "You came," she said. Jeremy nodded. "I wasn't sure if I should, but your aunt invited me, and I wanted to show that I'm not running." Brenda exhaled, a slow release she didn't know she'd been holding. "You didn't come to force anything?" "No," he said gently. "Just to show I'm still here. If you ever want to talk." She studied him carefully, the nervous way he rubbed his thumb against his palm, the sincerity he didn't hide anymore. For weeks her heart had been in a tug-of-war between anger and longing. But now, sitting here in the fading sunlight, she felt something else rising, curiosity. "Jeremy," she said quietly, "I need to understand something. Anything," he replied. "When we talked back then, when you laughed with me, listened to me, learned my world, were those moments real?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Those were the only moments that were real. They were the only parts of my life that didn't feel staged." She took that in slowly, imagining the weight he must have carried pretending to be someone he wasn't, while trying to build a connection he didn't expect to find. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said softly, "I want to start over, not as someone who needs to be tested, or someone who's hiding. Just me." Brenda looked down at her hands, fingers idly tracing the wood grain of the table. "Starting over isn't easy." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking you to rush. I just want the chance to show you who I actually am, without the lie." She lifted her gaze to him again. This time she didn't see the man she walked away from at the wedding. She saw someone humbled, someone learning, someone trying. "Starting over means you need to enter my world honestly," she said. "Not just standing in the background, but really being present." "I want that," he said. "Then you need to understand something else," she continued. "Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies alone. It's rebuilt through consistency." He nodded slowly, letting her words settle into his chest. "I can do consistency." Brenda's lips curled into the faintest smile. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The sun dipped lower, casting warm orange light across the yard. One of her young cousins ran over and tugged her sleeve, asking her to join a dance. She laughed, ruffled his hair, and told him she'd join in a minute. When she turned back to Jeremy, he was already standing, not approaching, just standing with quiet intention. "Go dance," he said with a small smile. "I'll be right here." "You sure?" she asked. "I like seeing you happy," he replied. Brenda swallowed lightly. That wasn't a line. That wasn't flattery. That was honesty, simple and soft. She stepped onto the grass and joined her cousins as they danced to an upbeat track. Laughter circled the yard again, and when she glanced back at Jeremy, he wasn't watching her with longing or regret. He watched her with respect. As the music faded into another song, Brenda walked back toward him, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to. He smiled when she reached him. "So," he said quietly, "is this a beginning?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lowered herself onto the bench beside him, closer than before, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. "It's a step," she said. "A real one." Jeremy released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It wasn't victory. It wasn't reconciliation. It was something smaller. But more important, it was hope. Not rushed, not forced, just earned. And for the first time since the wedding, Brenda felt something warm begin to settle inside her. Not the old trust, but the start of something new. Something honest. Something shared. Something worth exploring. Together. The weeks after the barbecue unfolded with a quiet steadiness neither Brenda nor Jeremy expected. They weren't officially back together, but they were no longer living in the silence that once kept them apart. Their conversations flowed in small, meaningful doses, soft messages, shared updates, the occasional call that ended with a comfortable pause rather than tension. Brenda didn't rush anything. Jeremy didn't push anything. They were building a rhythm again, but this time it came from a place neither of them had known before. Honesty. One Saturday morning, Brenda headed to the cafe where their story began. She didn't tell him she was going. She simply woke up with the urge to return to the place where everything shifted. As she walked in, she saw him sitting near the window, laptop in front of him, a mug of tea steaming beside his hand. He noticed her before she spoke. His face softened, the same way it always had when she appeared unexpectedly. "Morning," he said gently. "Morning," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him without needing permission. There was no awkwardness, just an unspoken acknowledgement that this moment wasn't planned. But it mattered. Jeremy closed his laptop slowly, giving her his full attention. "You look peaceful today," he said. She smiled faintly, trying to be. They talked for a few minutes about small things, work, family, the weather, until Brenda leaned back, folding her hands in front of her. "You said something at the barbecue," she began. "About wanting to start over, about being just you." "I meant it," he replied softly. Every word. Brenda tapped her fingers lightly against the table, thinking, starting over isn't about wiping the past clean, it's about deciding what we do with it. "I agree," Jeremy said, "and I want to build something real, something honest, something we don't have to hide behind." Her breath caught slightly, not from fear, but from the sincerity she heard in his voice. Jeremy shifted, reaching into his jacket pocket. Brenda's eyes widened slightly, her body tightening with instinctual caution. "Jeremy," she said, not sure what he was doing. He held up a small velvet pouch, not a box, not something polished or dramatic, something humble, something personal, something intentional. "I need to talk to you," he said, voice low and steady. "Really talk to you." Brenda didn't move. She watched him, her expression unreadable. He set the pouch on the table, but he didn't open it yet. "I used to think hiding parts of myself made me safer," he said quietly. "I thought pretending to be at rock bottom would show me who cared. But what it really showed me was how lonely I had allowed myself to become." Brenda's throat tightened. "I hurt you," he continued, "and I would give anything to go back and tell the truth from the beginning. But I can't. What I can do is show you, from this moment forward, that there will never be another lie between us." He swallowed hard, his voice steady but emotional. "No more disguises, no more secrets, no more tests." Brenda blinked slowly, her heart folding into itself. "Jeremy, honesty isn't just words, it's action." "I know," he said, "which is why I'm not asking for you to make a decision today. I just want to give you something that represents my promise." He opened the pouch. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a small, smooth stone, not expensive, not flashy, but chosen with intention. This isn't a proposal, he clarified quickly. Not yet. This is my truth. A symbol of me choosing to stand in the open, without lies, without fear. A promise that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I will ask you the right way. Brenda stared at the ring, breath trembling. But I won't rush you, he added. I won't push you. I just wanted you to have something real, something honest, something that isn't tied to the man I was, but to the man I'm trying to become. Silence settled between them, soft, fragile, full of meaning. Brenda reached out slowly, lifting the ring from its pouch. The weight of it surprised her, not heavy, but steady, grounded, warm from his hand. She held it between her fingers, studying the simple design. You picked this? She asked quietly. Yes, he said. I wanted something that felt like truth, not performance. Brenda inhaled deeply, her eyes lifting to meet his. Jeremy, I'm not ready for forever today. I know, he said immediately. But I am ready to believe you're changing, she whispered. Jeremy's shoulders loosened with relief he didn't try to hide. She slid the ring onto her finger, not on the hand that symbolized commitment, but the other, a place where a promise could rest softly, patiently. I accept this, she said, not as a yes to the future, but as a yes to us trying again, honestly. Jeremy exhaled, emotion flickering in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Brenda reached across the table, placing her hand over his. The first time she initiated touch since the night of the wedding. We move forward slow, she said, step by step. Truth first, he echoed. And for the first time since the lie shattered them, they shared a moment not defined by pain or distance, but by a promise neither of them needed to hide from. The ring didn't come with fireworks, but it shifted something quietly inside both of them. It wasn't a proposal, and it wasn't a guarantee of anything grand. It was simply a truth, a promise sealed with honesty instead of illusion. From that day forward, their lives began folding into each other's in a way that felt natural, unhurried, and real. Jeremy adjusted to Brenda's world with a kind of humility she hadn't seen in him before. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or gestures that felt excessive. Instead, he learned her rhythms, the cadence of her laughter, the things that calmed her, the stories behind family traditions, the foods that reminded her of home. One of their first weekends together after their reconnection was a family cookout at Brenda's aunt's place. He drove himself this time, walking openly, without hiding, without the chair that had once been his shield. When he stepped out of the car holding a bowl of store-bought potato salad, Brenda almost laughed. You really brought that? She teased. He looked down at it, slightly embarrassed. I didn't know what else to bring. My aunties are going to roast you alive, she said, shaking her head with a grin. They already do, he replied. And they did, but this time it was different. Store-bought? One auntie said, raising an eyebrow so high it nearly touched her hairline. Baby, who sent you? Jeremy didn't try to defend himself. Instead, he grinned sheepishly and said, I'm learning. I'll take notes. That answer earned him a laugh and a playful swat on the arm. Brenda watched him navigate the teasing, the noise, the warm chaos of her family with something close to admiration. He didn't try to stand out. He didn't shrink back. He simply blended in, slowly, respectfully, as if he understood he was entering a world that had its own heartbeat long before he arrived. Later that afternoon, Brenda showed him how to season chicken properly. He listened, focused, eyebrows furrowed, determined not to embarrass himself again. You're doing too much, she said, nudging him playfully. Calm down, just coat it, don't drown it. I swear this is harder than my financial exams, he muttered. She laughed, a warm, full laugh, and something inside him relaxed. Moments like this reminded him that love wasn't always grand declarations or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it was just two people standing over a bowl of chicken, teasing each other while smoke from the grill drifted through the air. In return, Jeremy began opening the door to pieces of his world, carefully, intentionally. He took Brenda to his penthouse for the first time not to impress her, but to show transparency. When the elevator opened and the city skyline spread across the floor-to-ceiling windows, Brenda inhaled softly, not in shock, but in recognition of the life he'd been hiding. You live like this? She asked, her voice a blend of awe and confusion. I lived like this, he corrected gently. Before I realized none of it mattered without honesty. She stepped inside slowly, observing the space without judgment. The clean lines, the muted tones, the minimalist furniture. It felt polished, almost too perfect. "This place doesn't feel lived in," she said honestly. "That's because I didn't live in it," he replied. "I existed in it, but I didn't live." Brenda looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her softened again. Over time, their worlds began to merge in small but meaningful ways. She introduced him to coconut rice, plantains, and the undeniable joy of a good jollof. He introduced her to clam chowder, apple crisp, and the quiet charm of New England comfort food. They swapped playlists. They swapped stories. They swapped pieces of childhood, the tender parts, the funny parts, the parts that shaped them without their permission. Every exchange deepened their connection without forcing anything. On Sundays, they alternated brunch spots, sometimes a modern cafe on the north side, sometimes a soul food diner where the servers knew Brenda's family by name. He fit himself into her culture with respect, never assuming he belonged automatically. And Brenda approached his world with observation, curiosity, and a willingness to learn without judgment. The first time he brought her to a formal dinner with his family, she felt the shift the moment they walked in. The polite smiles, the measured voices, the subtle stiffness he had grown up around. Jeremy noticed her discomfort and gently reached for her hand under the table. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, whispering back, "As long as you don't leave me." "I won't," he promised. And he didn't. Even when his family asked pointed questions, even when the atmosphere felt cold in comparison to her auntie's loud warmth, Jeremy made sure Brenda never felt alone in a room that once overwhelmed him too. Later that night, when they returned to his place, she wrapped her arms around him and said softly, "You didn't back down once." "Not when you're beside me," he replied. It wasn't drama. It wasn't perfection. It was human. Two people learning to navigate differences without losing themselves. And with each day, each conversation, each shared effort, the distance that once broke them became the foundation that held them steady. They weren't just building a life. They were building a partnership, slow, intentional, layered, and deeply honest. The day their daughter arrived began quietly, in the soft gray calm of early morning. Brenda woke before the sun rose, a sharp wave of pain rolling through her body. At first she thought it was another late pregnancy discomfort, one of the countless aches she had learned to breathe through, but the second wave told her everything. It was time. She gripped the edge of the mattress and whispered, "Jeremy." He startled awake, eyes wide, hair tousled, still half tangled in dreams. "What's wrong?" "You okay?" Brenda breathed through another contraction, nodding shakily. "It's happening." Jeremy didn't panic, not in the frantic, loud way people joke about. Instead, his entire body went still with focus, with a kind of reverence. He helped her sit up slowly, hands steady, voice calm but filled with emotion. "Okay, let's get ready. I've got you." They moved together in a practiced rhythm, a rhythm they'd rehearsed but never fully believed they'd need so soon. As Brenda dressed, Jeremy supported her, guiding her through each contraction. When they stepped into the car, he buckled her seatbelt gently, kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're meeting her today." Tears welled in Brenda's eyes, not from fear, but from a love that had grown through truth, patience, and choice. The hospital was quiet that morning, hallways humming softly with medical routines. Jeremy stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, helping her breathe through each wave of pain. Hours passed. Pain built, but between the contractions, Brenda saw the emotion building inside him, raw, unfiltered, overwhelming. He wasn't just witnessing the birth of their child. He was witnessing his entire life shift in real time. At one point, as she leaned into him, her nails digging into his arm, she whispered through clenched teeth, "You better not pass out on me." "I won't," he said, his voice thick. "You're the strong one here." They laughed, breathless, exhausted, and the moment felt like another thread tying their lives together permanently. Finally, after a final, powerful push, a sound filled the room that made everything else fade away. Their daughter's first cry. It was small, sharp, filled with newness, the kind that draws tears before your mind can even process them. Brenda collapsed back into the pillows, chest heaving, relief and joy washing over her all at once. The doctor placed their baby girl onto her chest, tiny, warm, breathing softly against her skin. Brenda's eyes filled instantly. She's beautiful." Jeremy stepped closer, his breath catching. He had imagined this moment, dreamed of it, but nothing prepared him for the reality. His hands trembled as he touched his daughter's back for the first time. The tiny rise and fall of her breathing felt like the most priceless thing he had ever witnessed. And then it happened. Tears streamed down his face. Tears he didn't hide, didn't apologize for, didn't try to swallow. This was a man who once believed vulnerability was a weakness. This was a man who once hid behind lies to test the world. Now he stood weeping openly at the sight of the life he had created with the woman who taught him the meaning of truth. "She's perfect," he whispered, voice cracking. Brenda watched him through tired, tender eyes. "She looks like you," she said softly. He shook his head immediately. "No. She has your eyes." Brenda laughed, exhausted but glowing. "She has your smile." Their daughter shifted slightly, letting out a tiny sigh that made both of them freeze in awe. Jeremy leaned down, pressing his forehead to Brenda's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving her life, for giving me another chance, for forgiving me even when I didn't think I deserved it." Brenda brushed tears from his cheeks with her thumb. "I didn't forgive you all at once," she said. "I forgave you slowly, the same way you learned to be honest." He nodded, eyes full of gratitude. "And I'll keep earning it, every day." The nurse returned a few minutes later to check on them, but before taking the baby for routine measurements, she asked softly, "Do we have a name?" Brenda and Jeremy exchanged a knowing look, not needing new names, not seeking something dramatic, simply cherishing the moment in silence. Brenda finally whispered, "Yes." It wasn't the name that mattered now. It was the unity in answering together. Hours later, with their daughter resting peacefully in Brenda's arms, Jeremy sat beside the hospital bed holding both of them close. The world outside the window glowed with the golden hues of late afternoon. Everything felt still. Everything felt intentional. Brenda studied their baby's delicate features. "She's going to grow up seeing both our worlds," she murmured. "The laughter of my family, the traditions of yours, and the truth we built together. And she'll know she was born from honesty," Jeremy added quietly. "From the work we did, from the love we chose every day." Brenda leaned her head against his shoulder. "Love isn't perfect, but we learned it can grow stronger after it breaks." "It can," he agreed, "because we built ours with transparency, not fear." Their daughter stirred softly again, tiny fingers curling around Brenda's thumb. Jeremy exhaled deeply, overwhelmed. "Brenda, this is the wealth I never knew I needed." She smiled, eyes warm. "This is the life we earned. Sometimes life tests us in ways we don't see coming. Sometimes people disguise their pain behind choices they regret. But when love is willing, genuinely willing, to move with honesty, healing becomes possible. Not quickly, not easily, but beautifully." This story is a reminder. The strongest relationships aren't built on perfection. They're built on truth, forgiveness, and choosing each other, even after the hardest chapters. If this story touched your heart, family, share it with someone who might need its message today.